I think I'm doing something horribly wrong here. I don't have my AV guy here with me this week, and I think I broke my microphone. And right now, I only have a reversed picture on the screen, but I think that flips around whenever I'm done. I'm not sure. We'll see. This may be an adventure. So good morning, everybody. I'm glad to see you out here this morning. Let's go ahead and while we wait for a couple of stragglers to come in, let's just go through a couple of logistics. Just want to give you guys a heads up. I will be here. Obviously, I'm here this week. Next week. The week after may be a little bit different, the 29th. I just want to give you a heads up on that right now. There will be a lesson. The question is, how will it be done? So I may record it. I may have a stunt double. We'll see. But that's something that I'm working through. The 30th? Yeah. So the 30th. So, because I also have I have a virtual conference that I'm hoping to attend that day as well. So I got a number of different things that I'm sort of juggling. So I just want to give you a heads up, more clarity on that next week. But I just don't want you to be surprised for that. Let's go ahead and let's go through our core values here. We'll start off with Jesus had a core value, and Jesus' core value was people. Now, at our church, we have 8 core values, and let's go through those. Who has a core value for the board? Bible. There we go. Bible, prayer, outreach. I'm community. I heard. I'm not going fast enough here. I think I heard relevancy. Stewardship. Service. Which one are we missing? Worship. And within a group, there's a separate set of values. And in this group, we have a couple of core values, one of which is timeliness, and the other is growth. All right. So that's where we are. And I want to just tell you that I am super excited for this lesson today. I hope you all had a fun Easter last week. I really dislike suspending class, and there's part of me that wishes we would have done this last week. But I think it's a very timely lesson. I would tell you that as we look at this through the lens of leadership and leadership principles, this is a principle that far too many leaders miss. And if you can get this lesson, if this lesson resonates with you, I'm going to tell you right now, it can change your life. It can change your life. So I hope that's not too high of a promise. But we're going to jump right into it today. We're going to jump right into it by going straight to Scripture. So we're going to look at a couple passages of Scripture, one in Matthew and another in Mark. We're going to look at Matthew chapter 10 and Mark chapter 3. Matthew chapter 10, verses 1 through 15. So let's go ahead and read this. It said, Jesus called his 12 disciples to him and gave them authority to drive out impure spirits and to heal every disease and sickness. These are the names of the 12 apostles. First, Simon, who is called Peter, and his brother Andrew, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus, Simon the zealot and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. These 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions. Do not go among the Gentiles or enter any town of the Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. As you go, proclaim this message. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. Do not get any gold or silver or copper to take with you in your belts, no bag for your journey, or extra shirt or sandals, or a staff. For the worker is worth his keep. Whatever town or village you enter, search there for some worthy person and stay at their house until you leave. As you enter the home, give it your greeting. If the home is deserving, let your peace rest on it. If it is not, let your peace return to you. If anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, leave that home or town and shake the dust off your feet. Truly I tell you, it will be more bearable for Sodom and Gomorrah on the day of judgment than for that town. Interesting story. Let's turn ahead to Mark chapter 3. We're going to look at verses 13 through 19. It reads, Jesus went up on a mountainside and called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12, that they might be with him and that he might send them out to preach and to have authority to drive out demons. These are the 12 he appointed: Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. To them he gave the name, I don't even know how to pronounce that, Boanerges, which means sons of thunder. Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. Now, these are parallel instances, I believe, of the same story. But I want to ask you, how is Jesus leading his disciples in this story? What is he doing? He called them together, and what did he give to them? He gave them authority. He gave them authority, and then what else did he do? He gave them instructions. And I'm going to tell you right now, there's a fancy word for this. And the fancy word I'll give you is Jesus empowered. Empowered his disciples. What all did he do? He gave them authority. He gave instruction. But in that instruction, did you notice anything particular in that first passage? Anything stand out to you? Think of the instructions that you get or you give. He gave them. I'm going to say the plus and the minus, right? He said, "Do this, don't do that." But then he also gave some situations, right? He said, if you go into a house and you find peace, or if you go into a house and you don't find peace, go away. Right? So he gave a lot of, I'm going to say, detailed instructions. He gave some, and perhaps a fancy word that we may use today is he gave some contingencies, right? And for a contingency, I would say if then, right? If this happens, then do that. If that happens, then do this, right? That's what we see here. And there's a very important principle that we need to make sure that we do not miss here. Jesus is empowering his followers, and if leaders want to be successful, they must be willing to empower others. They must be willing to empower others. They must be willing to take the power that they have and give it away. What type of power did Jesus give away in this story? Did you catch all those things? It said he gave them the authority to drive out impure spirits and to heal every disease and sickness. Verse 8, he said, heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. That's quite a bit of power that Jesus has given away in this particular story. The principle that we are going to look at today, and I've lost my eraser. How did I lose my eraser? Oh, there it is. Also lost my glasses. I can't see the other far side of the board. We are looking at the law of empowerment. And the law of empowerment says that only secure leaders give power away. Before we leave here today, I'm going to give you a story of an insecure leader in Scripture. We only have to go back a couple of pages. Maybe you can think of it right away. But the idea is this, is that when you have a secure leader and they give power away, what it does is it allows the people that the leader gives this power to reach their potential. It allows them to become more than what they currently are. One of the things you have to recognize, and this is not always the case, is that the leader needs to be on the side of the people that they are leading. That means that they are encouraging them. That means they are helping them succeed. That means giving them power. And I want to just give this as a bit of a formula, because I think this is what we see in this passage of Scripture. To some extent, we will see some delegation, right? We see this delegation, and leaders. We know that oftentimes there's all sorts of things on our plate that we need to do. There's a ton of stuff on our plate that we need to do, but sometimes we're afraid to give it away. We're afraid to give it away because we may give it to somebody and they may not do very well with it, right? That's the lie that we tell ourselves, is that, well, nobody else could fill in the blank. Nobody else could fix dinner quite as good as me, right? Nobody else could tell a story quite as good as me, right? Nobody else could fill in the blank. Something's coming to your mind, I have no doubt, right? But as a leader, we need to recognize, we need to delegate, we need to give that authority to somebody else to help them reach their potential. But it's not just the delegation, because you will find situations where leaders will delegate authority, but they're not going to give them direction, right? I can say, Dawn, I'm going to put you in charge of the church picnic, right? And that's great. Dawn's been delegated, but if I don't give them any parameters, right, what's going to happen? We're not going to have a picnic, right? So we need to have delegation. We also need to have equipping. And you may, that's just a fancy word for me for the direction, right? But you got to give them those. You got to give them those handles. You got to give them those things that will allow them to move forward. And I'm going to tell you right now, leading well is not about enriching yourself. There are so many leaders that say, oh my goodness, if I lead well, it's going to be so good for me. No. If you lead well, it's going to be so good for others. It's going to be it's going to be good for others first. That's what we're looking at. It's about enriching others. And I'm going to tell you, I wish I would have learned this principle 22 years ago. It would have been I'm going to say it was probably about the end of 2001 going into 2002. I got this phone call. Now at the time, I was traveling all over Northwest Pennsylvania working in various pharmacies. I'd probably worked in 10 or 15 pharmacies at the time, and I got this call. And the question came to me, Jess, would you be interested in scheduling pharmacists? And I thought, oh, that sounds fun. Now, for any of you that have ever written a work schedule, you know it ain't fun, right? But how I was sold on it? It was like, well, if you're writing the schedule, then you get to write your own schedule. You get to pick the days that you want. You get to make sure that you have the days off you want to have off. If you do it the right way, you can be off every weekend, which at the time, the way the lay of the land is that I would work about every other weekend. That was the lay of the land. So, whenever this invitation comes to me, what kicks in? Selfishness. Huge levels of selfishness kicks in. And so I went about scheduling. I said, I'm going to take the easy shifts, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. And I'm going to tell you, it turned out that it was very, very difficult. It was very difficult. And I would tell you that I found myself, I hesitate to use this language, but I hope you know me well enough, and hopefully there's also enough change in me from Jess of 2001 and 2002 that you would know that I'm not the same person that I was back then, but I know that I neglected people. Some may say that I abused. Oh, you took advantage of me. You had me work 3 days in a row. Like there were horrible things that potentially happened back then. And what I found is that I found myself struggling mightily to staff stores. And whenever I struggled that bad, I ended up just working the stores. I would give up and I would say, you know what, I'll go work. And I worked 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 and I worked. And for the guy who took that job thinking, oh my goodness, I'm not going to have to work a weekend, I would tell you I worked 46 out of 52 weekends. I've got somewhere I have the calendar. I should have dug it up and brought it in. I could tell you exactly where I was on any of those weekends. Now it wasn't the full weekends, but it was part or all of 46 out of 52 weekends. And whenever it got so bad, I would tell you that I ended up working 27 straight days, and that wasn't good for me. Some of you are hearing that and you're thinking, yeah, that's easy work. I get that, whatever. But it was a rough go, and I gave up. I cried uncle. That was it. I had to tap out. You see, I can look back now and I recognize that I wasn't empowered and I didn't know how to empower. There was a leadership principle that was absolutely violated at that point in my life. And when a leader can't or won't empower others, what he does is he creates barriers within the organizations that followers cannot overcome. And when a follower, if the barrier remains long enough, then the people are going to give up, they're going to stop trying, or worst case scenario, they're going to leave the organization. They're going to say, this is not a good environment for me. I'm going to leave. It is said that people do not leave companies, that people leave leaders. And that can be a tough pill to swallow, and I'd absolutely tell you that I found that was true. I can tell you that whenever I was offered that scheduler position, the first thing that happened was a guy named Bob, a couple pharmacies away, he said, that's it, I'm out. And I thought, well, hey, you didn't even give me a chance. But he probably knew me well enough to know that, oh, this isn't going to go well. Right? He probably knew, right? He probably had a little better forward vision than what I did to be able to see how things were going to happen. But I will tell you, when you think about this concept that people don't leave companies, people leave leaders, it can hurt. It can absolutely hurt. It hurts greatly when you've had people leave you. But while it hurts, I want to give you some encouragement with that, because it's important to maintain the perspective through this situation. This isn't a condemnation of your leadership. It's actually an invitation for you to improve your leadership. That's what it is. So when people leave, we need to recognize that, hey, this is the opportunity for you to get better, right? That's the invitation that's happening, should you choose to take it, right? Now, the first week that we studied these leadership principles, we looked at a law called the law of the lid, right? And we said any organization is capped by the leader, and there's different levels of leaders out there. I'm going to tell you, my experience is that far too many groups and teams and whatever have leaders that just have very, very low ability. And so it doesn't take a whole lot to really increase your leadership skill. And I think this may be one of those tools that can be very, very helpful for you to move forward. It can be very easy to go from a 1 to a 2, right? Or a 2 to a 3, or a 3 to a 4. Those are things that can happen pretty quick, and they can show a radical improvement. I want to give you 3 reasons. I want to give you 3 reasons why people do not empower others. And see if any of these may... That could not have gone worse. Not only did I lose the clock, I actually knocked the batteries out of the clock. And you know what that means? Yeah, it means we're here all afternoon. It actually means that I'm going to have to figure out how to set the clock whenever it's all said and done. I'm going to have to put it back together, and I'm going to figure out how to set it. But 3 reasons people don't. 3 reasons for, spell the word right, not empowering. And these are bad reasons, right? But these may resonate with you. You may find that some of these hit, they may hit a little close to home. I know they hit close to home for me. Number 1, job security. Right? That was the first thing. You have people that'll say, you know what, I got to keep this to myself, because if I give it away, they're going to find out that I'm dispensable. They're going to find out that they don't really need me. And I'll tell you, I have worked in small organizations and I have worked in large organizations, and this is so real. It is so real. It's like, hey, I've got to keep that information to myself, because that's what makes me valuable. I was working with Rite Aid. This would have probably been 2016. I'm going to say 2016, maybe-ish, somewhere in that ballpark. And the area of my expertise, and please don't let me put you to sleep with this, was around medication adherence. It was learning how people take their medicine. And there is such a there's such a calculus with how that is done, and I could go full nerd on you right now and just get into all the different details, and people would try to dumb it down, and I'd be like, no, it's actually much more complicated than that. And what happened is I was in an organization of 100,000 people with 99,999 not knowing which direction to go. There was one guy that knew some things to happen, right, and it was me. And I thought, if I just kept it, one day they're going to come knocking at my door and say, hey, Jess, we think you may have the answers for us. Hey, how about you bail us out? And I realized that was a bad attitude to have. It was a horrible attitude to have. And, part of what, well, I guess there were a couple of things that happened about that time. But I ended up going into, at Rite Aid, we had our own TV. Well, I guess it was a production studio, not really a TV studio. But it was set up, it looked like a little newsroom, had a news desk, it had monitors, there were some different things there. And I went in, I didn't have a whiteboard, but I had I didn't have a whiteboard, but I did have one of those big Post-it note tablet things, the giant things. And so I got a marker and I just started, I started teaching, and the guys in the production room didn't have anything else to do. So they're like, all right, we'll record you. And they produced it and whatever, and we started sending out videos every week. And we did, I think we did 1 video a week, and I think we did that for like 23 weeks, something like that, just to help people understand it. But what I found is that when I did that, whenever I started giving away what I had, I may have sacrificed some job security, but you know what happened to the organization? The organization got better. The organization then had more concrete questions to ask. They got to realize that, hey, maybe I didn't understand that quite the right way. But what about this situation? They would start to ask these nuanced questions, and we were really able to help propel things forward. So it was really, I would tell you that the realization is that by giving that away, it made me more valuable. By giving it away, it made me more valuable to the folks around, because they did not look at me as being dispensable. They looked at me as being indispensable. Number one bad reason to not empower people is job security. Number two, resistance to change. And if I had a nickel, resistance, I think I spelled that right. If I've had a nickel to how many times we've talked about change in this, I mean, we have a core value of growth. Growth means constant change, right? And I'm a firm believer that there's a lot of people that just absolutely love change for you. They love change for you. They don't necessarily love change for themselves, but they love change for you. I'm thinking you should do this, or you say, I'm thinking about doing that. Yes, you should do that. I am all for you changing. I'm all for me changing. Well, that's a different story. That's uncomfortable. That's some work that we're looking at right there. But empowerment brings constant change. And change makes people uncomfortable. Change makes people uncomfortable. But change is the price for progress. So we need to recognize that some people will not empower because they want to keep things the way that they are. And we got to recognize that what got us here won't necessarily get us there. If we want to get to the next level, we're going to have to do some things differently. Number three, lack of self-worth. These are the lies that the devil tells us, right? The devil tells us that, gives us all sorts of lies such as, well, you can't do anything that could help anybody else anyway. I don't know, maybe it's just me. Maybe the devil hasn't gotten your ear like that. He's gotten my ear like that a few times. Comes and he whispers these horrible lies that some people buy. Some people buy them. But some leaders do not give away their power because they do not believe they have any power to give. We've talked about this before. You cannot give what you do not have. So the principle of empowerment is typically where I start. Many of you know that I've gone out and I go out and I yell at the counselors at Camp for Kids every morning because they're like teenagers and they're groggy-eyed in the morning and they're like they resist getting up, like, you know, it's the resistance to change thing from the last one, like they want to stay sleeping. But I go out there and I yell at them and try to get them fired up for the day. And a few of you have actually been out there and witnessed that. But that comes from a leadership conference Trace and I went to in Cincinnati several years ago. And towards the end of the event, what happened was the speaker, who was he was like the principal at an all-boys school in Newark, New Jersey. He took us through an affirmation. And so we had everybody in the audience go through this affirmation. There was a line in the affirmation that said, I know I'm talking to a winner, right? And Trace and I were giving each other the affirmation. And whenever I got to that line, I know I'm talking to a winner, that cut me so deep. Because it had been so long since I thought of myself as a winner. I don't know if you've ever racked up a few losses in life. I had racked up some losses in life. And I obviously didn't have a whole lot of self-worth. And as we're driving out of Cincy, I think it was on I-7, I think I-71 is what connects Cincy to Columbus on the way home. I said to Trace, you know, it'd be really neat to be able to do that with the counselors at Camp for Kids. I said it, forgot about it. And a week before Camp for Kids, Trace says, are you going to come out and yell at the kids in the morning? I'm like, what? So I now have myself in a situation where I don't know that I can get out of. I don't know that I'm going to have to empower somebody else to go out and yell at the kids in the morning. That's for sure. At some point, that's going to be what's necessary. But it is, what I recognized was you can't give what you don't have. We're asking these kids to go out and encourage and empower the campers, but if they don't have it, they can't give it. So I said, well, maybe I can go out and I can give them a little bit of encouragement in the morning. Maybe I can empower, maybe I can get them fired up a little bit so that they can share that with their campers for the day and for the week. But these are the three primary reasons that people do not empower others: job security, resistant to change, and lack of self-worth. Let me just remind you all that you are so worth it. That's what last Sunday was about. It was about how worth it each one of you are. And if I can just, this is a little bit of a tangent. When God gives this plan to Jesus, I can only imagine what this looked like in heaven. But God's looking down, Jesus is there next to him, and God says something to Jesus like to the effect of, wow, that's quite a mess down there. And Jesus probably agrees, and he says, Jesus, I got an idea. I'm going to send you down there so we can bring him home. And he says, all right, well, what's it going to take? He said, well, I'm going to send you down there, and you're going to have to die on a cross. And he said, whoa, that sounds rough. He said, who all do we get? And I want you to know, your name came up in that conversation. And I also want you to know this. Jesus did not ask if there was a discounted way. He did not look to buy you back at discount. He bought you back at full price. That's what last Sunday was about. Don't miss that. One of the important things we need to do to empower people is we must believe in people. We must believe in people. We need to look at them where, we need to see them where they are, but we need to understand that there's a better place that they can be. We may look at them and we may see somebody who's operating at like a 3, but we know God makes 10s. We need to look at people, we need to see them where they are, but we also need to see them where they could be. And I'm going to tell you, I struggle with that. I still struggle with that, but I'm getting better. I'm getting better. And I'm going to tell you this story. This is, I've given you many stories over the years where it's like, I really hesitate to give this story because if it's possible, you may think less of me after I tell you this story. And this is another one, all right? So I would have been in senior high. And as a senior high basketball player, what we would do is in the summer, right after school, we would have basketball camp for the junior high and elementary age kids, right? And so we would divide them up into teams, and then we would play games, and they would do drills and do different things. Well, over the course of, I think it was 3 days, the teams are starting to play and whatever, and now there's a championship game, and my team is in the championship. And you know that most things on planet Earth revolve around who wins a summer basketball camp championship, right? Like I mean, it's like of all the important, like there's like landing on the moon, and like right underneath that is summer camp basketball championships, right? I mean, it's up there, and we weren't very sophisticated in those days. Like I had 8 kids on my team. And so I just gave them all numbers, right? It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And what would happen is we would start the game, and players 1 through 5 would start, and then whenever there would be they'd play for a couple of minutes, and then we'd do a substitution, and then it would go 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, right? And we would go. Well, I had this kid on my team that was literally half-sized. Like, he wasn't very big, and he wasn't very good. And I'm in the championship game. And again, there's a lot riding on this. There's a huge amount riding on this. And he's like, Coach, when am I going to go back in? Well, next dead ball, you're going to go in. And as we're getting close to the end of the game, it's neck and neck. And we're in if memory serves, and this may be flawed, the end result is not, but as we get close to the end of the game, It's a tie game, and I'm thinking if I put this kid on the floor, he might as well just play for the other team. That's really where that's how bad he was. It would just like give him the ball, whatever. And I'm like, well, you're going to go in. I'm going to need you if we go to overtime. And so it comes down. We have the last shot. We shoot and we miss. We are headed to overtime. But what's different about a normal basketball game and summer camp basketball games when it comes to overtime is overtime at summer camp is sudden death. Next hoop wins. And now I need to put half-sized Brian in the game. And I am dying. Again, think less of me if it's possible. I am dying. And so I'm like, okay, I got to get him in here. We've got to get a dead ball so I can substitute him out. Like that's my thing. Now, my brother Will is on the team. My brother is 6 years younger than me, so he was on the team. And we have a jump ball to go into overtime. My brother is jumping center. The ball goes up. He tips the ball. Whose hands does it fall into? Brian's. And I'm like, pass the ball. Do like anything to get it out of his hands. And this is just Brian. Brian got the ball, and I'm pretty sure like 90% of the population is right-handed, right? Only 10% of the population is left-handed. But if you remember the old gym at Cochranton, the stage end, that was the direction we were going. We were going towards the stage. The ball bounces. Brian gets it between the foul line and the three-point line, and flings it with his left hand. And time goes so slow. It goes so slow. And like, it's going, like there's a whole soundtrack playing. Like all this stuff is happening. And the ball's floating through the air, and I'm like, I'm just dying. This might as well he might as well just thrown it to the parking lot, right? And it goes, and it hits the backboard, and it banks in. It hits the backboard, and it banks in. And now, super coach that I am, right? I'm jumping up and down, yelling. I'm going to Disney World. I was doing I was celebrating, right? Half-size Brian's jumping up and down. There's hugs. There's all this stuff, But the thing is I wasn't willing to empower him. I actually empowered him by accident. I didn't learn the lesson. That was probably early 90s. 10 years later, as a pharmacist, I hadn't learned the lesson. Now I'm gray. When you don't learn, I think sometimes maybe this is just me. I think some of my grayness comes from not learning the lessons that God wants me to learn. And so now I'm at least learning the lesson. I'm not saying I'm good. I'm saying I'm better. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm saying I'm progressing. That it's just a little bit better. I tell you that story because this was a failure of mine. I didn't believe in Brian when I should have been believing in Brian. The law of empowerment was revealed to me, though I was a bit dense to pick up on it. But I will remind you that people tend to rise to the level of your belief in them. And I want to encourage you to believe in people. I want you to believe that God was intentional with the person that you're encountering. You may not understand why. I don't always understand why. I didn't understand, I had half-size Brian. Didn't understand it at all. He won me a championship. That does me nothing. That championship doesn't really serve me much today, but it does give me an interesting story to be able to share with you. Expect the people you lead to do great things. Give them the tools that they need. Equip them. Give them the direction. Give them the power. Give them the opportunity to do these great things. And I'm going to tell you this, there's no telling what championship you may win. No telling. Now, sadly, far too many leaders do not empower the people they lead. They seek to use people for their own gain. And you know what? We have a story of that in Scripture. And so as we look to wrap things up today, I want to point this story out to you. It is in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2. It's the story of the wise men, right? Chapter 2, verses 3 to 18. It said, when King Herod heard the wise men show up and they're saying, hey, where is the King of the Jews? We saw his stars. And when we get to verse 3, this is King Herod. When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed. He was insecure. Remember the law. Only secure leaders give power away. When Herod heard this, he was insecure, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. In Bethlehem in Judea, they replied, for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him. After they had heard the king, they went on their way. And the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, and he said, get up, take the child and his mother, and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and the vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more. King Herod failed to empower. If we look at our reasons, why do people not do that? Number one, King Herod feared job security. Right? He feared that. He thought, if there's a new king born, people are going to understand that I'm not a very good king, and that's going to be bad for me. Right? That's what's going to happen. And so what he did is he drained power from the people in a continual grab for power. He killed his own subjects to maintain his power. Do not miss that. This is in the literal sense, but there's leaders out there that will kill their subjects in the figurative sense. So that's where we are. That's where we are with this particular lesson. So I want to ask you, where do you find yourself? How do you do with this law of empowerment? Are you empowering others? Or let me ask you this, who might you empower? Who comes to mind? Who is somebody that comes to mind that you might be able to empower? And what would you empower them to do? And how would you equip them? I think those are the questions that we need to consider on this day. Who can I equip? How can I equip them? And what do I need to equip them with? So I want to encourage you to empower someone today. And that doesn't have to be with something big and major. It can absolutely be small and minor. In our household, one of the things that we did during the pandemic is we empowered Brendan to make dinner. Life-changing. Life-changing. We now have a reasonably competent cook in the house. And it took all sorts of burden off of Trace and the rest of the family, right? It is something that acting on the law of empowerment can have a huge, huge impact. And I'm going to tell you this, you may find yourself pleasantly surprised. And you may also see your leadership go to the next level. So with that, I'll just wrap up by putting the letters ACT on the board, as I typically do. Based on what you have learned today, what action can you take? What change will you make? And is there something that you learned today that you can teach to somebody else for your sake and for theirs?